Hey students, welcome to your first practice for Checkpoint 4 of the Great Gatsby unit. So we are discussing reliable and unreliable narration. And so for this first slide, this corresponds with step 1 of the document. You'll see a table that has numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, with 1 labeled most reliable and 8 labeled most unreliable. So you are going to use that table for this practice. So on this slide, we have 8 stock photos. We have 8 images of people, and I want for you to consider, of these 8 people, who would you consider most reliable and who would you consider least reliable? And then I want for you to rate them accordingly. So you'll notice that there's letters for each person. So on the 1 to 8 scale, go ahead and put those letters in. So go ahead and pause the video and enter those letters. I don't want anything I say to kind of sway your judgment. So go for it. Go do it now. All right, so hopefully at this point you've paused the video and you have filled in your letters. You're going to need to do that regardless, so if you haven't done it, go do it. But let's consider the final question. What is it that influences why you find someone reliable versus unreliable? And so the first thing you have to think about is what is reliability versus unreliability, and that's going to differ from person to person, so I'm not going to tell you. I want you to consider what it is you think reliability means. And then what about these people influence it? It probably has to do with possibly their profession. We have 2 pictures that clearly indicate profession, some that maybe imply profession. We have different ages. Does age affect your feelings of how reliable someone is? We have some very young people, people who are much older. Does gender affect it? Does the level of emotion that someone's displaying? Some people look very emotional. Some people are displaying less emotion or no emotion at all. Does that affect how you perceive people as being reliable? If the person looks like someone you know, so for instance, H, she looks like my friend Yasmina, that makes me immediately think she's more reliable because Yasmina is a very reliable person. And so maybe the person looks like someone you know, and that has affected how you've perceived them. So in that final question, just jot down some quick ideas as to what is it that affected whether you perceived people as being reliable versus unreliable. So go ahead and pause this video and go fill in that answer. Okay, so now that you've considered what reliability versus unreliability means to you, let's move on to step 2 of the document. So for step 2, we're going to be considering whether Nick is a reliable or unreliable narrator. So we've read chapter 1 and Nick has introduced himself, and I want for us to really dive into the first couple of pages and really consider what it is that Nick has shared about himself and how we feel about that. And so the question is, how does the diction, detail choice, and or literary or rhetorical devices that Nick uses prove he is a reliable or unreliable narrator? And so excuse me. So when we look at the actual document, you will see that you have quotes. Depending on the class you're in, you're going to have a different number of quotes, but you will have quotes. And these quotes come from the first couple of pages of the book, where we're really going to dive in and kind of start figuring Nick out. And so based upon the quote, what I'd like for you to do is explain, does this quote prove Nick to be reliable or an unreliable narrator? And explain your reasoning. And when you explain your reasoning, I want you to actually delve into the quote, pick out a specific word, pick out a specific detail, possibly pick out a rhetorical or a literary device that seems revealing. Remember, authors use these things to emphasize certain things, and in this case, to emphasize certain things about Nick, our character. They're working towards characterization, and so those tools are in there. Find them and use them to explain your reasoning as to whether you think the thing Nick says makes him reliable or unreliable. And what I want for you to understand is that it could go either way. There's no right or wrong answer here. Some people perceive Nick as being reliable, some perceive him as being unreliable. And this is just in the first couple of pages of the book. People's perceptions of Nick also change throughout the book. It's important to remember that Nick is telling this story after the fact. Hold on. Sorry, I'm not sure if you could hear them, but I had to stop my dogs from yelling outside. So what was I saying? Nick is telling this story after the fact. So he knows everything that's going to happen in his book, and he's telling it from hindsight and sharing his reflections upon it. And so we're going to see what Nick has learned over time, all through his own perspective. And so keep that in mind while you're reading. You might consider Nick reliable at the beginning, and then by the end of the novel, think of him as unreliable, or vice versa. At the beginning of the novel, you might think he's unreliable, and by the end, he may have become a more reliable character to you. So don't worry about getting it right. Worry about exploring the characterization that Fitzgerald has created and developing your own opinion. All right, cool. So those are the directions for our document. Go ahead and get it done. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye.